Now I'd like to introduce Professor Dirk Van Damme, the head of the Innovation and Measuring Progress Division in the OECD Directorate for Education and Skills. Professor Van Damme holds a PhD in Educational Sciences from Ghent University, and he's been a Professor of Educational Sciences in the same university since 1995. Professor Van Damme was General Director of the Flemish Rectors Conference, the main advisory body for higher education policy in the Flemish part of Belgium between 2000 and 2003. He was also Chief of Staff to the Flemish Minister for Education from 2004 to 2008. His current interests are evidence-based innovation in education, comparative analyses of educational systems, new developments in the learning sciences, and knowledge management in education. Please join me in welcoming Professor Dirk Van Damme.
Thank you so much, and it's great to see you all here gathered today and coming days. It's a bit ungrateful to stand between this last speakers and the reception, but I hope that I will be able to still catch your attention a little bit to expand on some themes that the previous speaker has elaborated on, and also my boss, Andreas Schleicher. So let me start by putting emphasis on something which has already been mentioned, the tension between increasing levels of qualifications, credentials, and the doubt that is also there in the society and in the economy on the quality and the relevance of what they mean, what the skills equivalent are of these credentials. Indeed, the increase in tertiary education qualifications in the world is enormous. It's actually one of the biggest revolutions in human history, that we are able to uplift such a quantity of people to a higher level of educational success. And of course, the increasing demand in many parts of the world is still there. So tertiary educated people are now actually close to 43% of the young age cohort, and it will increase. But there are some associated risks with that. I'm not a believer in the fact that we are educating too many people. We cannot educate too many people, but we can maybe overqualify too many people and give the impression to the economy and to society that all these qualifications are necessary. We start to see some signs of overheating, risks of overqualification, not risks of overskilling, but risks of overqualification. And in some countries, this is becoming really a problem where you go to 25 or 30% of the labor force working in jobs for which they are overqualified. Some critics say, yeah, but a tertiary degree still leads to higher income and better job opportunities, and that's true. We still see in our data that the wage premium, so the extra earnings for people with a tertiary qualification compared with people with only a secondary level qualifications, that wage premium remains significant. But the problem is that we are looking at these data as relative wage premiums. And we all know that the labor markets are polarizing. So we are pushing out the middle in our distribution. And that means that the wage premium for tertiary educated people is actually earned at the expense of people with middle-level skills pushed out of the labor market. The polarization of labor markets is actually a very interesting and very important phenomenon that we are witnessing today. Another interesting way of looking into overqualification is by looking at skills. And unfortunately, we have very little data on skills, even at the OECD, where we try to be the best of the globe in data collections and analysis. But we don't have that many data on skills. We try to improve, but we have only fragmented data on some of the foundation skills like literacy, numeracy, and problem solving. And what we see is, despite this massification in higher education, despite the increase in post-secondary qualifications, we don't see an increase in skills. We see actually a decrease in skills, even in the foundation skills of literacy and numeracy, which is worrisome. We are educating more and more people, but we are not upskilling more and more people. The literacy and numeracy levels have decreased since the 90s, and the last time that we assessed them in 2012, 2015. We are now preparing for the next cycle of the PIAC survey, for which these data are coming, to be administered in 22, 23. And hopefully we will see a reverse of the tendency then, but that's absolutely not sure. And if we compare more in a granular way what has happened in those 20 years, we see the decrease in various levels of qualification, including tertiary levels. Tertiary qualifications mean less skilled people. And that's actually dramatic given the trends and the mega evolutions on which the previous speaker has commented. A tertiary degree is not signaling a skills equivalent across countries. So it's not over time, but also not among countries. And actually what you see is that a secondary school graduate in countries like Japan or Finland has higher levels of skills than a tertiary qualified person in a lot of other countries more to the left of the chart, which is amazing. And actually testimony or proof to the thesis, for which employers are also gradually convinced, that a qualification is not signaling anymore a skills equivalent. So are we then seeing a mismatch between what education delivers and what education promises? And we are all for education. I'm an educationalist. I believe in the power of education. But do we see a mismatch between what we are promising to society and to employers and what they need? And of course, I could show a lot of slides on this broken promise. Actually, the skills that employers again and again indicate as being critically important to them are not the skills that they find easily on the market of qualified people, and are not the skills for which most of our institutions are preparing. And well, the previous speaker has already mentioned it. I'm just showing this example of Ernst & Young, who publicly said, we are no longer looking at qualifications because they are not delivering what they are promising. We will do the assessment of job seekers ourselves. And assessment is now shifting from tertiary education institutions very rapidly to employers and to organizations themselves. And that's absolutely dangerous for higher education or post-secondary education institutions, because assessment and credentials used to be their main monopoly. That monopoly is gone, and there is nothing much in place to replace them, unless we focus on skills. I want to focus on all the megatrends which are out there, and I'm happy that I can follow up on the previous speaker who has given such a wide horizon of what is happening to our societies and economies. I will want to focus a little bit more specifically on digitalization, because we believe at the OECD that this is forcing us to rethink our mission on skills development. And of course, most of the stories that are in the newspapers, and even in a very smart publication like The Economist, of where these covers are taken from, they are very dramatic, almost frightening stories about the impact of computers, robots, artificial intelligence on jobs, etc., etc. We take a bit of a different and more optimistic view based on the research that we are doing on the impact of digitalization. What is for sure is that some competencies are fading out and others are coming into, are rising in importance. And if you look at this chart, it's a well-known chart, probably you have seen it before. Routine manual, but also routine cognitive skills are rapidly disappearing from the labor market. And you have to ask yourself, for what kind of skills are we training our young people? Are we training them still for routine cognitive labor or routine manual labor, procedural kind of labor, tasks which are prescribed in manuals and procedural documents, etc., etc.? Or are we able to train our students for non-routine kind of challenges, both analytic and communication? Because we believe that those two are really becoming very important. So what digitalization is doing actually is a combination of two shifts which are happening at the same time. Of course, higher use of ICT, which is quite understandable, but also the shift from routine to non-routine. And this combined gives you this kind of picture where actually what used to be the main kind of labor, the main kind of task in the past is gradually disappearing. And what is the effect of this? I just want to briefly explore on three dimensions of labor. We believe that higher ICT intensity and more non-routine kind of tasks will increase the variety of tasks that people do. I will not explain the methodology behind these data. It's quite sophisticated analysis. But if we look at changes in what people actually do, the impact of digitalization is not that these tasks are being impoverished. No, the impact is that these tasks become richer. More different kinds of skills and competencies are mobilized. More skills are used. More digitalization in jobs is increasing the appeal to foundation skills and the use of foundation skills like reading at work, writing at work, numeracy, etc. And these changes are quite significant. So digitalization is enriching what people do, is not impoverishing what people do. And finally, digitalization is pushing people to learn continuously. We believe that digitalization is finally, after so many years that lifelong learning has been a catchphrase, but very empty and not real, digitalization will mean that lifelong learning becomes real. Because moving from a less digital job to a more digital job encourages people to learn from co-workers, to learn by doing, to keeping up to date, etc. I don't want to make my presentation too long so that we have a little bit of time for questions as well before the reception. I want to focus on four main messages that are coming out of our work on digitalization, skills, changing jobs, etc. Foundation skills even matter more than in the past. Foundation skills, I mean basic cognitive skills. Basic does not mean at an easy level. We have to go to a very high level, but skills like literacy, numeracy, problem solving. They are and they will remain very important. The strange thing that we see is that tertiary education is not protecting against low-quality foundation skills. Universities, polytechnics, colleges, I will not differentiate because we cannot do that in our data, but tertiary education still allows a significant number of graduates to leave the institution and enter the labor market with very low levels of foundation skills. This is actually very, very strange. We are not guaranteeing to society that a person with a higher education qualification has a certain minimum level of skills. Why we need more and higher levels of skills in these foundation skills? Because actually computers are catching up. We did a very interesting exercise last year, a little bit inspired by the climate change panel of the United Nations, which produced a very alarming report yesterday. But we asked 15 leading artificial intelligence people of the world, and we gave them the PIAC survey, so our survey on adult skills, assessing literacy and numeracy and problem solving. And we asked them, please, can computers do this item, this item, this item? So we simulated actually where the computers can do the same test that we are putting to humans. And we asked them, can the computers do them now? And what is the situation in 10 years' time? And actually, they came to the conclusion that computers are up to the end of level 3 of what humans can do already. And that's absolutely very, very high. Some very basic things computers cannot do. The easiest item in PIAC is actually an image, and the interpretation of that image is not yet possible by computers. It will come. But computers can actually do literacy and numeracy tasks for which almost 85% of the people are proficient in. So only 15% of humans can do literacy and numeracy tasks that computers are at this time unable to do. That's actually quite frightening. So that means that we have to, in these foundation skills, we have to develop the capabilities of humans to stay ahead of machines. Message 2. Given the fact that we are probably not able to beat computers all the time, even if we are increasing our foundation skills, we have probably to look at the combination of skills. Digitalization will demand people to develop well-rounded skill sets, less specialization. And again, I ask you, is our training in colleges and polytechnics moving to the path of specialization, which we believe is detrimental, or is it to the path of well-rounded skill sets with a lot of importance for generic skills? The most successful countries in the world, even in moving to digital economy, are those countries where this well-rounded skill set is dominant. Countries like Finland, the Netherlands, Scandinavian countries, etc., my own country. And countries where specialization is very high are actually facing a very hard time. It's countries who have a highly specialized workforce who are having the most difficult time in transitioning to the new economy. Tertiary educated workers are working in less specialized jobs than middle educated workers, that's for sure. But the differences between countries, again, are so big. Look at this chart where you see more to the left is less specialized, more to the right is more specialized, and you see that tertiary educated workers in countries at the bottom are working in more specialized jobs, hence less resistant to the wave of digitalization and robots and artificial intelligence that we are seeing coming. we believe that generic skills are absolutely very important. I mentioned already foundation skills, but I don't have the time to expand on what skills then I mean with generic skills. But for example, critical thinking, problem solving, collaboration, these kind of skills are really becoming very important. And often we hear, when we are discussing these things, people say, yeah, but these generic skills do not exist outside of content areas. And that's true. We see important differences. For example, this comes from an assessment of critical thinking in higher education institutions, that these skills are very unequally distributed in different content areas. You learn generic skills in a certain content field. There's nothing wrong with it. That's not what I mean by specialization. But specialization is when these skills are just narrowed to meet specific requirements of jobs that are, or tasks that are existing today. Third, beyond well-roundedness, we have to think about new, or maybe not so new, but very important human capabilities that computers will never be able to compete with. Of course, digital skills in themselves are a very important new capability. And some people think that even younger generations have very well developed digital skills. No, they haven't. They are not. I don't believe in the term millennials, but even millennials do not have the digital skills that are required. They have very simple, basic digital skills, but not the problem-solving digital skills that we will need in the year to come. But that's maybe just the first layer. That's not the most important one. We see the emergence of very different kind of skill sets, and this comes from a report of the World Economic Forum, which is exploring the same kind of questions, and they are looking into all kinds of new skills, cross-cultural competencies, computational thinking, social intelligence, sense-making, etc., etc. A lot of words, a lot of fashionable words as well, and this thinking is advancing gradually. We don't have the final answers, but we are looking into new skill sets on the horizon of what we are doing. I just want to say a few words on social and emotional skills, because we think at the OECD that these are becoming incredibly important. And probably higher education institutions have been training for these skills already for ages. They are not so new. But what is new is that we are having a much better evidence base, that we have much clearer insight in what these skills mean and why they are so important. And we have all kind of research now that shows that actually non-cognitive skills are at least as important in lifetime success, in this case in employment, than cognitive skills. So if you move people higher up in cognitive skills, their chances of becoming unemployed later will diminish. But the same is true for some of the social and emotional skills, and especially conscientiousness, which is absolutely becoming a key skill for dealing with the new economy. Conscientiousness is about achievement orientation, about self-control, responsibility, persistence, etc., etc. In the beginning of your talk, you mentioned demographics. I also want to mention the health crisis. We are really steaming towards a major health crisis by the middle of this century. But if we are looking at the health issues that are becoming so important, and we look at them from an educational perspective, we still cannot explain why more educated people, if you control for income, employment, social networking, etc., why more educated people are more healthy. And the answer is conscientiousness. They have a better control of their own behavior. They are more responsible, they have more resilience, they take self-control over their lives, etc. And it's actually those kind of skills that also employers value very much. In the future, there will be no distinction in the skills demand for work and for other spheres of life. We see that these things are merging and coming together. So what makes people successful at work is going to be the same thing of what makes people successful in life in general and in the community. So conscientiousness, just to name one example of these social and emotional skills, is becoming very important. Actually, and we are not very well advanced in this thinking, but artificial intelligence is actually forcing us to think much more deeply and creatively about what it means to be human. I do believe that we will be able to stay ahead of machines. But we have to redefine very carefully what that means to be a human. And it means all kinds of skills, cognitive, non-cognitive. It also means values, it means attitudes, it means knowledge, in all kinds of and forms, etc. But we are forced to do that thinking now, and we have to do that collaboratively. Fourth and last message that I want to make is again on lifelong learning. Lifelong learning, and I have always been fascinated by the concept, but it's around for 50 years when UNESCO first promoted the concept of lifelong learning 50 years ago, the Rapport de l'Or, etc., etc. Beautiful publications, nothing happened. Policymakers have not taken the message of lifelong learning seriously. I think digitalization will force us to do it. And it actually is a very promising, positive impact of digitalization and artificial intelligence. In our data, we've seen that people working in more digital workplaces have continuous skill development. Their skills are not disappearing. People working in less digital workplaces, their skills are becoming obsolete, and people are de-skilling. This is actually going against a lot of the popular rhetoric that computers and digitalization are de-skilling people, are taking away skills from people. No, computers will add to the skills that humans have. If we look at the not the perceived, but the objective need for upskilling, this is higher for people working in more digital environments. And that's especially true for people with a tertiary professional degree. Look at that bar, where you see that the continuous need for upskilling is the highest of all qualification levels. And that's actually very promising for the kind of things that you are doing, because you will be able to take the lead in lifelong learning. We are now producing a major report on lifelong learning to be published next year, and we are drawing up a kind of chart where people can easily see what the strengths and weaknesses are, a scoreboard, if you wish, of countries in lifelong learning. And what we see, and I'm just giving you a very simple presentation of that, is that for most countries, education is still about what's happening in the first 25 years of a human life. I don't understand why this front-loaded image of education is still there. We know it's not accurate, but policymakers, institutions are still having that concept that education is happening between 5 and 25 years, and not much thereafter. So you have a few countries at the top which have more positive results on lifelong learning. Canada is one of them, together with Scandinavian countries. But you have countries where actually you have very negative results on what's happening after school careers. Japan and Korea are actually examples of countries where lifelong learning is actually not absent, but seen as negative. And then you have many countries, the majority actually, the list could be much longer at the bottom, of countries where you have nor positive nor negative, just nothing on lifelong learning. And that should really be a wake-up call, because without lifelong learning, we are, of course, going to lose the battle with computers. So lifelong learning actually is my fourth message. And that's my final slide. I just want to repeat these 4 messages to really put them in your head and to convince you of the more positive impact that digitalization, computers, artificial intelligence are having on what we are doing. Thank you so much for your attention.